I get asked this question a lot, especially by newer firm owners, on when they can make their first hire, what that would look like, how do they know if they can afford it, and then kind of how to understand their costs. So I'm going to share with you a quick calculator you can find in the notes below. You do have to give me your email address and I'll send it to you, but either way, it's going to be pretty easy to get. And hopefully this can really help you in your process as you kind of evaluate and try and understand whether or not hiring is the right step for you at this point. So in this calculator, I'm going to kind of walk you through all the inputs here. So number of attorneys. If we're just starting off, this is just one, but you can use this calculator as you continue to grow to kind of understand how things are going. Number of support staff. So this is paralegals, admin, basically anything but an attorney that you're hiring. And I wouldn't put in contractors here. So if you're doing like a third party part-time paralegal, I actually wouldn't include that here because really what you're trying to do is replace them with a full-time paralegal. So I would leave this as 0. So annual revenue for our purposes, we're going to put 250. This is a relatively healthy firm, about where I think most people start thinking about hiring a paralegal full time. So total annual salary cost, this does not include yourself. So if you're an S corp, leave it off, leave your personal salary off. But we are going to account for other expenses. So in this situation, we're going to say $80,000. Again, these are all estimates. This is just what I would see and expect to see when looking at someone who's trying to hire for their first time. And then we're going to choose paralegal here. You have choices here. Virtual assistant is another great one to start with. If you're trying to scale up and you really need some time to, hey, do marketing or networking or whatever it might be, and so you don't have as much time to be in the office and do other things. So a virtual assistant can be really helpful in that situation. Most of the time, I think lawyers hire paralegals first. A virtual assistant or a paralegal, I think, makes a lot of sense. Admin assistant is kind of the in-between a virtual and a paralegal. Usually I would consider an admin assistant once you already have an office space. So usually just starting off, I wouldn't recommend immediately getting an office space. Some people are going to disagree with me on that. That's okay. But an admin is going to be kind of between the paralegal and the virtual assistant. Again, I'd try and have a location before you get an admin assistant. For our purposes, we're gonna talk about a paralegal. But if you want to hire an attorney as well, something else you can look at on this spreadsheet. So for a paralegal, this is generally the range I see, at least starting off. You can't find paralegals that cost more than this, and you can find some below. I would be hesitant to say that that's a smart idea, but I mean, you can see this above that. So benefits, I think this is more applicable if you're trying to hire an attorney. Paralegals are more willing to come in without all of the extra benefits that happen. But if you're going to subsidize some healthcare and say, oh, we're going to give you an extra $5,000 for healthcare or whatever it is, you can input that here. For our purposes, we're going to leave it blank to keep this simple, but you're welcome to input that there as well. 401k match would be in there as well, things like that. Something I don't want you to forget, payroll taxes. The employee pays half of that, and then the employer pays half of it. So this is your half of the employment tax. You can see that it's 7.65% for you as a firm. So some of these are going to be really, really applicable, right? Revenue per attorney is just going to be the total revenue divided by attorneys. 250, I think, is about healthy. You could maybe get down to about 200, but I think that would be a little bit of a difficult firm to run long-term. I think 250 to even 500 would probably be a little bit more normal for what I see from a single attorney. And then revenue per employee. This is basically taking that revenue number again and then dividing total employees. So in this case, we are adding 1 as if we're hiring that paralegal, right? So this is revenue per employee. There's you, the single lawyer, and then the paralegal we're hiring. So we're looking at 125 here per employee, and that's not bad. Usually I would expect about 100 to 200 per employee. And obviously that's going to vary greatly depending on your business, what type of law you're in, but those are kind of the lower estimates that I would expect. So again, we're going to take these salaries, 65,000 to 100,000. We're going to take the lower limit and then the upper limit of total cost that they're adding. Profit margin after hire. So you can see profit margin is really revenue minus expenses. we're adding in, so here are our expenses, here's our revenue, and then we're adding in the salary of the paralegal in this situation for the lower limit and the upper limit to what that would look like. So profit margin after the hire is 100,000 if you went cheap a little bit on the paralegal, and then up to like 62,000 or down to 62,000 if you hired someone a little bit more experienced. And the profit margin is still okay, but I think the profit margin in this situation is going to be kind of lying to us a little bit, because if we had an attorney in the same spot, it would be significantly lower. I think the big thing when hiring a paralegal is to open up more of your time to be able to do more law work so that you can bring in significantly more money. So the goal is that we bring in that paralegal, suddenly we can jump this revenue number up to 400,000, and then suddenly that's about where I want your profit margins to be after just one single employee, just one paralegal. And then this is a good salary to go home with. But if we're at that 250 mark, this is why I like this 250 mark, because I think this is all reasonable assumptions. This is just a little bit tight for when you hire that first paralegal. I'm not saying don't do it. In fact, I would argue if you can do it, do it. It's better to hire early and often with the right employees, I should say, but hire early before you're in desperate need than to hire late when you're swamped, because once you're swamped, it's really hard to hire and bring them on, train them, make sure they're good on your policies and procedures. So I'm a big fan of hiring right around this point. I would maybe try and get them at the $65,000 to $70,000 mark. You're right. You're going to be taking a pay cut. I think what a lot of attorneys struggle with is they started their firm, they got to 250, they finally feel like they've made it. Their income in this situation is 170 a year, and then they bring on a paralegal and suddenly it drops again, and it feels like you're starting over from scratch a little bit. The nice part is every employee after this, it's a smaller drop for you personally and a bigger growth opportunity long term. So the first hire is always the hardest one, and then the second one, and then the third one, and every time it'll get a little bit easier. I would encourage you at this 250 mark to bring on that employee if you can. And I understand not everyone's there. Some of you might have families that you have to support, and that might not be doable, in which case I totally understand. Bring this number up to 300, 350, and then bring on that paralegal. But I think this is about when you should start really thinking about it. Up until this point, part-time paralegals are great. They're a huge addition, and I think a big unlock for a lot of small firms. And then once we're at this profit margin, and we bring someone on, the next hire is going to be easier, because let's do the math real quick. So let's say we already have one support staff. Let's say we bring someone on at that upper limit. So we're going to say 70,000. So and let's say we're at 300,000 already. So you'll notice the next paralegal, while it still hurts, that's $30,000 more than it was prior, right? So again, that second hire is going to be a little bit easier than the first, because every time you're just making a little bit more money. Obviously in this case, revenue is still pretty good per attorney, obviously, because there's only one of you. And then revenue per employee is down a little bit. So I think in a perfect situation, let's say this is 400. I got the amount of zeros right. I'm good. So it'd be 400,000, right? And then 150 includes that paralegal, other costs. We're bringing in basically the same paralegal situation, right? So you're looking at 180 to 142 range. Again, just a lot easier to bring someone on, and that revenue per employee still looks good. I think things get a little more tricky if that second employee is going to be a lawyer. Then you're jumping basically the same situation that you had with the paralegal you're doing with the lawyer again, which can be good. It can be worth it. I'm not saying it's not, but I think it's important to realize, hey, if nothing changes, where would we be? And then if you can survive on that, then it's okay to bring someone on, because I'm 100% confident that your growth can happen. If you're growing to this amount, then you can grow to the next stage. And so I would much prefer to make sure that we're okay and comfortable with that next hire as things are, nothing changes. And then hopefully we can have upside rather than viewing only upside without considering the downsides. And this is kind of the downside scenario, if you will. So hopefully this helps. Feel free to go in the comments and grab the calculator. You're welcome to use this. It's not anything complicated or any complicated formulas or anything, but hopefully it helps you kind of understand and visualize and put your thoughts around hiring.